Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads.
Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle. Jamie Eads joining you as always. This is episode 68. I hope each and every one of you are having a fantastic week out there. I know that I certainly am. We have a wonderful program for you today. I will be joined by one of the brilliant jazz artists of the day in just a moment. Mr. Mark Walker will be our guest, talking all about his new record that just came out back in April. So we're going to have him coming up in just a moment after this message from our sponsor, Los Cabos Drumsticks. The best kept secret for drummers is finally out. Los Cabos drumsticks may look like the sticks you grew up with, but these are not your father's drumsticks. Los Cabos Drumsticks is Canada's #1 drumstick brand, and they are coming to a retailer near you. With operations in over 28 countries worldwide, thousands of drummers have already discovered the Los Cabos difference. Using FSC certified wood from Canada and the US, Los Cabos make the finest quality drumsticks, percussion tools, and accessories on the market. The best news, Los Cabos Drumsticks offers you a ton of choice. They have 22 individual drumstick models and 14 percussion tools, many of which are available in 3 different wood types: maple, white hickory, and red hickory. Red hickory comes from the center or heart of the hickory tree and has been independently proven to be both stronger and more elastic than white hickory without adding a lot of weight. While most drumstick manufacturers have shunned red hickory, Los Cabos Drumsticks has embraced it, becoming the only established stick brand in the world to offer a full line of red hickory drumsticks. To learn more about Los Cabos Drumsticks, visit them online at loscabosdrumsticks.com. Follow them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and don't forget to ask for Los Cabos Drumsticks at your favorite retailer. Dare to be different. Join the Red Hickory Revolution with Los Cabos Drumsticks. All right, guys and girls, as I mentioned, we're about to be joined by Mark Walker. Mark is a Grammy winner, just a fantastic jazz drummer. He played in the group Oregon, which some of you jazz head folks are certainly going to recognize that name. Mark originally hails from Chicago, and he spent some time in New York City, and now he is living in Boston, and he's been up there for several years. But his new record, he's stepping out as the composer and band leader. The record is called You Get What You Give, and it is quite simply a fantastic record. So I was very pleased to get Mark on the phone to talk all about this new release. It hit the streets on April 2nd, 2019. So make sure you go out and grab a copy of it. Again, it's just a fantastic jazz record. So please help me welcome to the Drum Shuffle the great Mark Walker. Good morning, Mark. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing fine. It's beautiful in sunny Natick, Massachusetts here.
Oh, okay, Massachusetts. Yeah, you're living in Boston these days, correct?
Right. I've been here for about 13 years, and before that, I was in New York for about 10 years, and I'm from Chicago.
So world traveler in more ways than one is Mark Walker. So, Mark, thanks so much for taking time to come on the Drum Shuffle. We really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So, growing up in Chicago, tell us a little bit, because, I'm in the South, and, I think most people's upbringing on the kit typically starts with, Friday night marching band, for the football games. That's kind of how it rolls in the South. Probably a little bit different in Chicago, but share with us how you got into drumming. Did you come from a musical family?
Well, there weren't musicians in my family, but my parents were really into music, and we had a turntable where they would play all kinds of music from folk to jazz to pop. And I heard, a lot of Beatles and Bob Dylan, and we grew up in basically what was the inner city in Chicago. It was the Old Town area. So I used to walk around, and I'd hear music coming out of clubs like James Brown, The Doors, and Latin music. I had no idea what I was hearing. I remember hearing Chicago for the first time, and that really struck me. It was coming out of a jukebox.
Yeah.
And I started really getting into listening to the radio and following the top 100 or top 10 lists. And the first record I ever bought was Frankenstein by Edgar Winter.
That's a good one to start with.
And that kind of had a big influence on my career because it's an instrumental tune. It's kind of fusiony, kind of jazzy. It's got a sax solo. It's got a trades with timbales and drums. And it's got electronics. Everything I love.
Yeah, for sure.
Eventually, my mother turned me on to Hendrix and Santana, and those had a lasting influence as well. I probably was influenced by Elvin Jones through Mitch Mitchell. And I remember a couple of specific moments. One was in South Haven, Michigan. We used to go up there in the summers sometime before it was expensive. And there was a band playing, and I just started getting interested in drums. There was a band playing called Hartsfield, and they had just finished their set. And I asked the drummer if I can go up and play his drums, and he let me do it for some reason. So I started playing a groove, and I was playing a drum set, mic'd, going through a PA in front of a crowd. That's the first time I had ever done that. It was kind of an epiphany. It was like, oh, I should be doing this. So eventually, soon after I got my first tour together, believe it or not, in grade school, I got a couple of guys together. I had a drum set and a guitar amp and a guitar missing a couple of strings, and we started playing the riff to Frankenstein. Dun, 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 just repeating it. And we went from classroom to classroom. But, of course, I didn't have permission, so we got shut down in the third classroom. That was my first tour.
That's fantastic. So at what age was this?
Oh, I had to be in fifth grade.
Okay, so real young, really.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started playing, I got my first kind of toy drum set when I was 11, and started playing in the school band at the same time, so that's how I got the snare drum. And then I was lucky to live next to this woman who had a lot of connections in the music business, and she hooked me up with a summer job at Deegan. They used to make mallet instruments, and also got me a lesson with Roy Knapp.
Oh,
and
wow.
I have to backtrack for a second because at age 13, I had a single ticket to go see Buddy Rich. That was another life-changing moment. I saw him at Drury Lane Theater in Chicago in the round, so you could see the stage revolving slowly, and I could see in front of Buddy, behind Buddy, could see everything he was doing, and it just blew me away completely. And at one point in the evening, there was an old man sitting next to me who also had a single ticket, and Buddy Rich said, "Now I'd like to introduce a very special guest in the house, the Dean of Percussion, Mr. Roy Knapp." And the old man next to me kind of tapped me with his cane to help him get up. So I helped him up, and there he was, Roy Knapp, the Dean of Percussion. He had taught Gene Krupa, Louis Belson, Hal Blaine. So many different drummers studied with him.
Yeah,
and then
that's
3
just
years later,
incredible.
I went in for my first lesson. So I was 16. He was 87. I walked into his apartment, thanks to my neighbor who hooked me up with him. And first thing he says is, "Sit down over there." And he pointed to the piano. So the first thing we did was sit down and write out scales and harmonize a melody and write out chords and key signatures and everything. Then he had me go sit at his table where he had an old school practice pad, the one that was a wood kind of tilted block.
Yeah.
And we went over the rudiments and stuff. And he was quite an amazing person. I kind of got used to the smell of chewing tobacco when I would walk into his place.
Oh, that's fantastic. But I mean,
and he said something to me that I might say at the end of this interview, but he said, you got to study like a doctor or a lawyer if you want to be successful in this business.
Yeah.
Which is totally true.
Yeah.
So I didn't really do that till much later, but
well, yeah.
Trying to do it. So, I started after high school. I went to high school at Lane Tech, which is a big school of 5,000 kids. And I took all the music programs I could there, concert band, jazz band, marching band, orchestra, and played some rock on the side. And the rock band I was playing in went into the studio and did a demo. And I was talking to the engineer and telling him I liked jazz. And he said, oh, we have a jazz jam session on Sunday. You want to come down? So I came down and played with some local Chicago musicians. And one of them, Stephen Hashimoto, who's still on the scene today, a bass player with hair down to his knees, he invited me to start rehearsing. And I rehearsed with him and did my first jazz gig with him. And that had to be around 1980. And then I was introduced to the whole Chicago scene, and I started working. And, in short, the gigs got better. And I started getting sessions, recording sessions, did a lot of R&B. I just took every kind of gig I could, from country to jazz to avant-garde rock to orchestral stuff, just to try to get as much experience as I could. And some drummers around really helped me out. Like the first time I met Paul Wertico, I used to come here and play, and he was amazing. Still is one of the best drummers out there. And he said, oh, you're Mark Walker. Are you free all the Saturdays in June? I said, oh, hell yes.
Of course I am.
So, he gave me some what they call jobbing work, which is, they have different names for it, but like weddings and stuff.
Yeah.
But, the thing about weddings, I mean, people may say, oh, it's boring, play weddings. What do you want to do that for? But it helped me understand that I had to make people dance.
Yeah.
But I had to be quiet enough for the grandmother of the bride, who was sitting right next to my snare drum, to have a conversation. So
yeah,
it helped me develop dynamics too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that whole scene, I've done my fair share of weddings, and, and there are guys that make a living playing, bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, and you know what I mean? It's just
sure.
Those kinds of gigs, the Moose Lodge, the VFW Hall, whatever the case may be. That's really when you're paying your dues, and man, you're learning how to be in a band.
Oh, exactly. And when you have the right people with the right attitude, it just sounds great and it's fun.
Yeah, it is. I mean, playing Brick House for the 97,000th time, maybe not so much, but,
right.
I've groused about that song for years and years and years. And, at this point in my life, when I have to play that song, it feels like it's about 7 hours long. So,
well, that reminds me of, I don't know if this is the exact quote, but, I think Elvin Jones was asked about playing My Favorite Things, 300 nights a year, maybe for 5 sets with John Coltrane. And he said, well, they asked him, don't you ever get tired of playing that song? He said, well, we played it as if it were the last time, every time.
Yeah.
Something like that. I'm just paraphrasing, but that attitude, I don't know if I could do that with Brick House, but
yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of the running joke, if you're doing any kind of cover gig, where it's, top 40 or oldies or anything. Yeah. Somebody's always going to ask for that song, if it's a wedding or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And, people have asked me over the years, gosh, how do you do it? And you just, even though you might hate playing it again, you think about everybody out there in the audience and say, this might be the highlight of their day, and you have to approach it. You have to approach it that way.
They're having a good time, and
for sure.
Keep it going, and you'll get overtime. That was my motivation.
That's exactly right. So. Well, so when did you, transition your playing career to New York? And I don't want to gloss anything over, but I know that at some point you made the decision to move, to New York City. and you got busy pretty quick. But
Right.
Was it a gig that led you to New York, or did you say, hey, it's time for me to expand my field here?
Well, things in Chicago were really good. This is talking about the early 90s. Jingles were happening. I was getting tons of calls for that. And Paquito D'Rivera hired me to go on the road for a while and record some records. And that was a real thrill because I started working with people like Giovanni Hidalgo and Danilo Perez. I had no idea who they were. But they're just, like at the top of their game. And then at the same time, Lyle Mays, Pat Metheny Group piano player, formed a quartet, and we went out with him. So this was all happening, and I would come home to a stack of jingle checks, which was not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But then I started getting restless. I thought, wow, I should really... actually something happened. I played at the Blue Note in New York with Paquito, and I met Michel Camilo. And Michel is famous for using fantastic drummers like Dave Weckl, Horacio Hernandez, Daphne Sprieto, Cliff Almond, Joel Rosenblatt, and many others. And I said, "Oh, Michelle, it's great to meet you. I'd love to play sometime." This is up at the dressing room in the Blue Note on a break. And he said, "Oh, yeah, well, move to New York and we'll do some playing." And I thought, "Whoa."
Yeah, my ticket is purchased.
Yeah, right. So and just, not to mention working with Paquito, that was amazing. And so I decided to move to New York, and when I got there, I didn't know how to contact Michel, so I looked at the back of the CD, and his phone number was on there, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
So I called him up, and I said, "Hey, I'm here. Let's play." So he said, "Okay, I'll send you a few charts." And so I started rehearsing the charts. I got a gig teaching at Drummers Collective at the time, and I used some extra time I had just to go into a room and practice his material. And then in '96, Horacio El Negro Hernandez got the gig with Santana. So Michel called me, and I already was booked on a tour with Paquito D'Rivera, big band. And so I asked him if I could sub out, and he said, "Coño, it's good exercise. Go ahead." And so he got Antonio Sanchez to cover for me while I covered for Horacio. And so I did a gig for about 2 years, and at the same time I got the gig with Oregon featuring Ralph Towner, which was a completely different style of music.
Yeah.
And so that was a real thrill, touring with both of those guys and playing with Paquito here and there. And I was also working with the Caribbean Jazz Project featuring Paquito, Dave Samuels, and Andy Narell. And that's definitely, that was a little school for all of us because we had a bass player, Oscar Stagnaro, who was from Peru, and he had so much knowledge of Peruvian music and South American styles, as well as Caribbean styles. We had a pianist from Argentina who's a great rhythm player, Dario Eskenazi, and then we had the trio in front, Paquito from Cuba, Andy Narell, who played steel pan, who was almost like an honorary Trinidadian, and Dave Samuels, one of the best vibes players in the history of the instrument.
Yeah.
So we made several records, and we would travel without a percussionist because they didn't really have the budget, but we would record with percussionists like Luis Conte and Pernell Saturnino, just some of the top guys. So I had to figure out a way to play these Latin rhythms to fill it in and make it sound like there were two guys playing. And I, worked on various ways to do that. So, it was great experience, all through the 90s learning about these Latin rhythms and Brazilian rhythms. And I was doing a lot of Brazilian gigs around New York as well. So it was a really good time to, be in New York and do a lot of playing and a lot of traveling. And actually the Berkeley gig came up in around 2000, 2001. They were looking for a full-time person up there, but I didn't get the full-time position, but they offered me a part-time position. So I took it and started teaching Brazilian percussion, and that led to a lot of different things. That led to me putting out a book and authoring some labs and authoring an online course in Afro-Cuban drums. So it's been a great 19 years over there, part-time, and met a lot of people, and that basically led to me doing this record.
Well,
This record actually, You Get What You Give, is actually the result of a Berklee faculty grant. So I got free studio time, and I called the best players I know, including Alain Mallet, great piano player. He's been musical director for Paul Simon for many years. And Oscar Stagnaro on bass, and fantastic guitarist named Tim Miller. And the same percussionist I mentioned, Pernell Saturnino, and Paulo Stagnaro, Oscar's son, who's now playing percussion with Ricky Martin. So we did about 7 tunes and about 4 or 5 of my originals. And that was about 12 years ago. And for some reason, I sat on it for many years and didn't do anything with it. I guess I just got too busy.
Really? Okay.
And finally, a few close friends of mine kind of lit the fire under me more recently. And I just went ahead and I was going to put out the record with 7 tunes. And I realized that I really should have 10 tunes on a CD to make it worth it. So I got some more studio time by the same engineer that had recorded me 12 years earlier for an engineering class that he has. He needed a band to come in to record. So I just got whoever I could find at the time, and we just walked in. I had no idea what we were going to do. And we walked out with 3 tunes.
That's fantastic.
Two of them were originals.
Those are the best sessions, where you walk in completely blind. You have no idea what's going on. All you know is you've got studio time, and sometimes it's the most free and creative that you can ever be, on the other side of the glass kind of thing, It's
absolutely.
Just fantastic. Well, the record, I think the official release date is sometime in April of 2019, which is just a couple of weeks away.
Right.
But I got my hands on a media only preview copy, and I gotta say, it sounds fantastic.
Thank you so much. Well, there are a couple of factors in that. I mean, beyond the playing. The playing is, by all the musicians is wonderful. But we had a really well-balanced mix, and we did it at Berklee Recording Studios, which are kind of state-of-the-art. But then I made the decision to have it mastered at Capitol Records in L.A., because they have certain gear that no other studio has, and they don't mix necessarily with plugins. They mix with old school tube compressors and whatnot. And so I thought, okay, I've got this nice, fun interaction in the studio, well balanced, and if I put this LA sheen on it, this sparkle on it, it might sound really good. And that's exactly what we got.
Yeah. And I think a lot of musicians, and I don't want to get too much, inside baseball here, but
that's okay.
I think a lot of musicians will spend a lot of time and a lot of energy on recording the best, album or song that they can possibly do. They spend a lot of time on the mix to make sure everything is great. And then they just master it in Pro Tools with the, generic Pro Tools mastering plugin kind of thing. And you definitely lose something there. Immediately to my mind, George Marino at Sterling Sound, there's a reason why when you read your liner notes, his name is all over everything because, and he charges $10,000 to do an album.
Wow.
It is not cheap, but there's a reason why, every record you heard from the 80s and 90s was mastered there. It's a critical step that a lot of people think, well, it's not going to make that much difference. And the casual music fan doesn't even know what mastering is really. So it shows on your record. You can definitely hear it. It sounds great. And when you said, a lot of this stuff was recorded 12 years ago, I was shocked because it doesn't sound that way. If that makes any sense, it sounds.
It's pretty much the same technology. I mean, it doesn't go back, it was definitely Pro Tools back then. It's Pro Tools now, but Robert Vosgian, who did the mastering, I was there with him when he did it, and he just did an amazing job. And he told me that the project he did right before mine was remastering Birth of the Cool by Miles Davis. So
wow.
I thought, okay, I'm with the right guy here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it sounds fantastic. And, I've spent a little bit of time with the record and, listened to it 3 or 4 times. And, without sounding too uneducated, it's definitely got the Latin flair to it, no doubt about it. There's some really cool fusion-y kind of stuff going on in there. But the track that I was really drawn to is the track called Deep Six, and it's got a lot of really cool stuff going on in there.
Yeah, Deep Six, I kind of got lucky with that one. I had written that and recorded that with Oregon on this album called 1,000 Kilometers. And I actually got a Grammy nomination for that tune in the category of Best Instrumental Composition in 2007. So I wanted to put that version on the record. And, I've been playing Afro-Cuban stuff for a long time, so 6/8, that rhythm was not brand new to me, but I wanted to write something really cool with an interesting melody. And when I was writing it, I was on tour with Oregon at the time, and Ralph Towner is one of my favorite composers. He's perhaps the best classical guitar player in the world and a great jazz piano player too, and one of my favorite composers, as I said. So sometimes what I would do is kind of get his input, a little feedback on something I'm writing.
Yeah.
Because I'm lucky to be stuck in the van with him for 6 hours. So what I would do is I'd write something, I'd maybe work on the first ending of that piece, and I'd hand the laptop up to him with a set of phones, and he said, no, not quite. So I'd rewrite it a couple of times, and then he said, yeah, that's it.
Well, look, spending time with somebody like Ralph Towner, how this guy isn't, a household name, I'll never understand, because he is just simply.
He deserves an honorary doctorate if anyone does.
I completely agree. Just one of the stone cold great guitarists of all time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
he's on tour now in the States.
Is he really?
Yeah.
How old is Ralph
Boston,
now?
Chicago.
Ralph's got to be getting up there in years.
Yeah, he's about 80 now.
Okay. Well, more power to him, and the more generations that can go out and watch him play, the better off we're all going to be, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
But that's just got to be incredible. But at the same time, I guess I'm curious, as a drummer first, who's composing, on melodic instruments, and we can touch on this, but I'm always curious when a drummer decides to do a drummer-led project or a drummer-led recording, how nervous do you get when you hand your melodic compositions to somebody like a Ralph Towner and let him critique it? Does that ever just kind of mind warp you a little bit? It would me.
Well, sure, yeah. There have been compositions I've handed him where I'm sure he's thought they sucked and he rejected them. So I'm used to it.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's, I've had some wonderful drummers on the show that have also composed their own music. And
That's great.
It is great, but I'm always curious, when you're sitting down and writing these things, are you thinking drums first or melody first? And what has always shocked me is that everybody says, nah, the drums are usually nowhere in my mind when I'm composing, the piano or the, anything like that. I'm not really thinking about what I'm going to be playing as a drummer.
Yeah, I forget about the drums. That's exactly it. I mean, sometimes when we first rehearse a piece, I'm listening so much to what everybody else is playing to make sure they have it right that I don't even know what to play on drums. I have to develop the part after the fact.
Yeah. Well, I know in my mind, I would be thinking about how am I going to approach this as a drummer? And it's because I don't have those strengths on piano or guitar or any other instrument. I can play a little, but nobody wants to hear it. You know what I mean?
But you could still hum a melody or come up with some kind of melody and develop it. So, you have as much music as anyone else.
Well, yeah, that's true. And, I guess in all of my musical situations over the years, I've always approached it as, my role is more of the, the town planner, if that makes any sense.
I like that.
Yeah, let's put the bridge here instead of there. Or, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's no good going, to the chorus a third time, whatever the case may be.
You're really into structure. That's good.
Yeah, it's more about arrangement, I guess, to me.
Yeah.
But,
me too.
Nobody will ever give me credit for saying, well, Jamie helped me come up with this guitar riff, even if I did, because I can hum it and say, now do something with it. But I can't, I don't feel confident enough on any other instrument to sit down and say, this is the melody of the song. Right.
Right. I mean, I don't really play piano in real time, but I have a certain knowledge of harmony, and I can come up with a melody in my head and put it together with the chords. So that's basically, and I can steal other ideas. So that's what I do a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and, I tell people all the time that, there's nothing that hasn't yet been done. I mean, there's not, 5 chords out there that nobody's discovered yet,
Right.
And they've all been played in different orders 1,000 times. So,
oh yeah,
it really is all about the arrangement to make your song different than thousands of others, I guess.
Yeah. And it also comes down to, what would you like to hear? What would you like to listen to? At what point does it get boring if you do too much of this or too little of that? Or how is it balanced out? That's what's important to me too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and mission accomplished on, you get what you give. I mean, it's a great record. And, dare I say, very danceable. I mean,
oh, wow, great. I never thought of it like that. That's cool.
I think if somebody wanted to have, a Latin dance party, this is absolutely a record that I could hear playing, I mean, it's really groovy. It's cool. And, I encourage all of my listeners to check it out. So, I know that, in our pre-interview, you mentioned that CD Baby was handling some of the distribution for you. Other places that it's going to be available?
Oh, sure. It'll be available on all the digital platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Well, again, kids, buy it from CD Baby. Mark gets more money that way.
Thank you in advance.
Yeah, for sure. But, because streaming it on Spotify, I think, one stream equals 0.0001 cent. So you basically get 1,000th of a penny for every stream. So
I was hoping the zeros would go in the other direction someday.
Oh yeah, don't we all? But don't get me started on how we get paid. I'll blow up the interview for sure.
Well, actually, a good source for musicians, I think, is, have you heard of Ari Herstand? Ari's Take?
Yes, I have.
He's got a great book it's called How to Make It in the New Music Business. And it's really kind of my Bible right now.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, it was written just a few years ago, but it's one of the most up-to-date books on the whole business. And he's not against Spotify like a lot of people are, but he just tries to be smart about how he collects his royalties. So I'm learning a little bit about that every day.
And you have to, but right. I mean, the copyright board here recently decided to raise the rate that, copyright holders receive from these places. And of course, right. Spotify and Amazon immediately protested, sued in federal court. And, Apple said, no, we'll pay it. So kudos to Apple for, I guess saying, no, we're going to pay, what's right. And then you have, terrestrial radio, which is a whole nother, bucket of stuff.
Absolutely.
They don't pay any royalties at all. It's a subsidy from our federal government, really. And, there's, what is it? The Local Radio Freedom Act in Congress right now, which is, who would be against local radio freedom? But basically it's telling these massive broadcast corporations, no, you don't have to pay songwriters anything. We'll
Amazing.
It is the Wild West. It's a jungle out there, and I wish you nothing but the best. But
thank you.
You're welcome. But it's hard to make a living in this business, and that's why so many folks have to stay on the road all the time to make money.
Right. I think they also have to. I can't remember the expression. Like there's something where you extend sideways. You extend your business sideways by doing other things. So for me, it would be setting up a clinic the same day as a show.
Right.
Or selling books or selling CDs. So there's all these opportunities that any musician would have if they really think about it to generate more income. Because the gigs, if you fill the house, yes, you'll do all right. But when you get all the expenses in there, it's a little tough. Even with a big group,
it really is
tough.
It is really tough. And it's, and God forbid if you're an opener for somebody, it's a lot of times, a lot of people don't realize it, but a lot of times the opening band has actually paid the headlining band to tour with them. And that happens all the time in the business.
Wow.
It happens all the time. The headliner's making a little bit of extra money by selling the opening slot. And those bands are looking for the exposure. That's why they're out in the merch booth after their set, trying to move T-shirts and CDs. And, I apologize for turning this into a clinic on how to make money,
okay,
Mark. But
we have to talk about it, yeah.
Yeah, but but you mentioned doing clinics before shows, and I definitely want to get this in there. The Modern Drummer Readers Poll just came out a few weeks ago, and you were one of the top 5 clinicians as voted on by the readers of Modern Drummer. So clearly you've been doing a lot of clinic work, good clinic work.
Well, that was kind of a surprise. I think that came mostly about because I was featured in an article in the December issue of last year, and they have a series called... Now I'm spacing out on the series name. But it's about working players who are also teachers.
Okay.
And so I kind of laid out some of my playing and teaching philosophy in that article, and I guess a lot of people liked it. So all of a sudden I was nominated and wound up getting 4th place. And Mike Clark, the great drummer, who's a friend of mine, he got 4th place in the mainstream jazz category, and we were in touch. So I said, hey, when it comes to number 4, we're number 1.
That's fantastic. But, I tell everybody who was in that category with you. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Dana Hall from Chicago.
Yeah.
He's amazing. All those players, Benny Greb.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're in a rarefied air there, appearing in that list, or whether it's first place or fifth place. It doesn't matter. It's just, I think it's a testament to what you're out there doing. What is a typical clinic for Mark Walker look like? What can, folks expect if they come to one of your clinics?
Well, actually, I just did a clinic last week in Chicago and at Vic's Drum Shop, and great shop, by the way.
Yeah.
And what I did was I played along with one of the new tunes on my record, and then I talked about what I had just played and different Latin rhythms, and I took questions about that. That's what most people ask me about. But I'm prepared to talk about pretty much any style of music. I'm not really a metal kind of person. I don't usually play double pedal. But when
Fair.
If there are plenty of guys who can explain that really well.
Right on.
Plenty of ladies and gentlemen who can explain that really well. But people ask me more about authentic Latin rhythms because I've really studied it. And one of the things I always tell them is that listening is 50% of it. Because if you have a context, then you'll know more about what to play. But if you haven't heard it, you'll just sound like you got it out of a book.
Yeah.
And like my colleague at the University of Michigan said, the paper don't swing.
That's exactly right. It does not. And, if I can interject for just a second,
Sure.
I grew up as a disciple of John Bonham. I mean, that's,
me too.
That's kind of the center of my drumming universe, because
He's amazing, yeah.
He kind of had all the tools, the power, the groove. He had some swing to him.
The tuning.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, he was just the center of my drumming universe. And without fail, there's 5 million videos on YouTube breaking down every John Bonham groove. And you can find that stuff for Buddy Rich or Elvin or any drummer really.
Sure.
But I can, from a mile away, I can spot the guys that learn their Bonham groove from YouTube. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You can see it from a mile away. It doesn't come from I'm just going to play along with the record a billion times until I figure it out. Right.
Those guys really had the groove. I mean, Bonham was funky.
Yes, very much so. And, those are the great drummers that we're going to continue talking about for another 100 years. What did this guy do? Jeff Porcaro, the list goes on and on and on, trying to get inside their head,
Yeah.
So, and I think if you just buy a book and learn how to play something, that's only part of it. So your point is very well taken.
Right. Even if they buy my book, just listen to the music first.
Well, that's exactly right. And, I know that you do a lot of great work, in your teaching at Berklee, and you're bringing up the next generation of great players. What are you seeing, the young college age guys and girls, what are they coming to Professor Walker with? What are they wanting to learn about?
Well, basically, they're stealing my gigs, and that's a good thing.
Right.
Like Eric Dube, great drummer out of New York. You should interview him sometime. He's a fabulous player. Okay. And he basically stole my gig with Paquito D'Rivera. I mean, I still work with Paquito. I'm just joking about stealing it, but he deserves it because he put the work in, and he's a great player. And there's a young Japanese drummer. He's about 20 years old, and he can play everything. He started studying with me when he was 13. He signed up for my website, markwalkerlessons.com, and he was the only subscriber to send me videos of himself playing, and I gave him feedback, and he got all the styles down, everything you could imagine, like 14 countries worth of, grooves. And now he's got a full ride scholarship at Berklee, and he's stealing my gigs in town.
Wow.
But they're supposed to steal our gigs, right?
Yeah, they are,
Yeah. And that's one reason I formed my own thing. Nobody can steal my gig.
That's exactly right. And
right?
It makes me happy to hear, these younger players and, look, I'm not over the hill by any stretch of the imagination, but I see these young players coming up and there are so many of them that inspire me, and it makes me kind of go back to the woodshed, and that's what it's supposed to all be about, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's some guys coming out of Berkeley that are just, they have great technique, great musical sense. They're nice people. They have a really good business sense. They're really organized, and they're coming out with their own records, and they're like, less than half my age. So
well,
they're doing really well.
It's scary when those guys get, 20, 30 years experience, what they're going to be like,
Yeah,
I mean, it's scary. Well, so Mark, what is going to happen next for you? I know that you're about to fly out of the States and go to Japan for some work. But are you going to be touring, later this year here in the States on the record, or?
Yes, I'm going to be, I'm currently looking for a booking agent, but right now I'm booking my own shows. And, I do have a CD release happening and drum clinic on the same day, near Boston at the Center for the Arts in Natick. And that's a little bit west of Boston, Natick, Massachusetts. That's going to be on May 16th.
Okay.
So I'm going to be working that, and then I'll be booking some other stuff.
Okay.
So I do have a website. It's markwalkerdrums.com. So I'll be listing all the shows up there, and I'm on a Facebook and et cetera, et cetera.
Cool. And now I know that you also do some Skype lessons and things like that. So for our listeners that might want to do a little bit of studying with you, is that the best way to reach out to you, is through the website?
Sure, you can do that. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Well,
email.
Yeah, I mean, look, if anybody needs some jazz playing lessons, it's yours truly here. I had the great Peter Erskine on this show last year. And
wow. Fantastic.
It was a real highlight of my day. Let's just say that.
Yeah. He's always been a super inspirational player to me. And as far as being on the LA scene, I mean, he's the king of sessions, the king of education, and the king of jazz players. He's got it all happening.
He does. And just
great guy too.
Super nice human being. But,
yeah.
We were talking about me and my playing. And that's the cool thing about Peter, is he was curious about me. Like he kind of turned the interview around and wanted to know about me. And I was just blown away. But I told him, I said, I just can't play jazz. I love listening to the genre. It's just not in my wheelhouse. And he said, well, why is that? And kind of, psychoanalyzed me for a couple of minutes. But, his point, what he said was, the older players get, drummers especially, they want to kind of go back to the origins of the instrument, and everybody ends up discovering jazz at some point, right?
Oh, yeah.
So when you grow up in a rock and roll or R&B kind of life the way I did, 2 and 4 is, the word of God, the strong backbeat on 2 and 4 always. Mm-hmm. How do you get out of that mindset and learn how to swing and comp?
Okay, here's the answer. You go to the Crossroads. Check this out. The Crossroads, what I'm talking about is a video I saw on YouTube with Chuck Berry. I think it was 1959 at Newport, and he had Papa Joe Jones playing drums. So this is the crossroads of jazz, rock, and blues, because they were playing a blues. It was swinging. Papa Joe is, the father of jazz drumming, and he's playing a backbeat on 2 and 4. So he's the father of modern rock drumming. And there's a clarinet solo, and it's a rock clarinet solo.
Okay.
So that I just wanted to put that in perspective, because it's all happening right there. So that's kind of where you can split off in any direction you want. You can go straight up swing from there. You can go straight up blues from there. You can go straight up rock from there. And that's where it all meets. So there's always a meeting point between all those all those grooves, and it just happened to be on stage at Newport in 1959.
Okay. I will absolutely have to find that.
Oh, yeah, you got to check it out. It's swinging, too.
Yeah, and that's my problem is, I sound like a rock guy trying to swing. You know what I mean? I don't know how else to explain it. I have a hard time just letting kind of that jazz comping with the left hand flow out of me.
Well, to me, it all starts with a ride, but there's definitely some bottom to it too. Like, I would say what you can do is you can listen to a bunch of jazz records and try to play the ride cymbal along with the drummer with the same pocket that they play it with. Don't worry about the comping stuff. And then at a slower tempo, you could add some soft feathering on the bass drum. That's really hard to do at a faster tempo, but at a slow tempo, it's a little easier. And then as far as comping, just imitate some of the phrases you hear, but what you have to strive for is balance between the four limbs. So the ride cymbal has to be prominent. If you're feathering the bass drum, that has to be way down. Just think of it as adding a little bottom end to your cymbal beat. And then the comping has to be slightly under the cymbal so that it's not smack, like that.
Right.
Now, of course, there's going to be somebody who breaks the rules who's, legendary.
Right.
But in a general sense, if you have the balance, and then the other part, if you have the balance, that's going to be a good start. Then you have to get the feel, and it really all starts with the ride cymbal. One of the, besides usual coordination exercises, one of the things I always show the drummers at Berklee just getting into swing is some videos by my colleague Ian Froman, who's a great drummer around New York. He's a Canadian drummer from Ottawa, and he's been in New York for years, studied with Elvin Jones. And he's got these videos on alternating the ride cymbal. So what he's doing is getting away from the static dang, dang-a-dang, dang-a-dang, dang-a-dang sound, and he's creating these variations. But he's taking out some key notes, and he's tying some key notes to really give it kind of an open feel. And I really like these videos. I like the way it opens things up and creates more space. And if you watch what he's doing very carefully, a lot of the times when he does anticipate or tie something over, he'll back it up with the drum, and it sounds really cool. So that's been a big influence on my style and teaching. So Ian Froman, if you look up alternating the ride cymbal, those videos are now on YouTube.
Okay.
I think they were on Vic Firth for a while, but really makes a lot of sense what he's saying about that. If you check that out, I think that will probably change your playing.
Well, it's definitely something that I'm interested in. All these years playing in various settings and learning how to play a proper Texas shuffle and all those things. There should be no reason why I can't. Honestly,
absolutely. It's all about the groove. It's the same thing.
It's not a physical limitation, I don't think. I think it's just something in my head that I haven't figured out after 30 years of playing. Maybe I never will, but I appreciate the insight and advice, Mark. I truly do. That's fantastic.
Oh, yeah. My pleasure. My pleasure. And if you go out and hear live jazz with some great players, that will definitely be helpful too. I remember hearing Elvin Jones one time, and and Roy Haynes for that matter. So many of the greats. It was just, it's just so influential just to feel them pushing that air.
Yeah.
And doing amazing things with rhythm.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking time to come on the Drum Shuffle. We really do appreciate it. And, my pleasure. The record is just fantastic. I hope everybody will
so much.
Go out and buy a copy. Now, as is the tradition here on our program, we always ask our guests for a good piece of advice to share with other musicians and other drummers. So give us a good piece of advice that we can take out there in our day-to-day life.
Okay. When I was 16, I saw Art Blakey at a club in Chicago, and I had the gumption to go up to him and say, "Hey, Art, do you have any advice for a young drummer?" And he said, without any hesitation, he said, "You got to play with someone every night." Took me a while to understand that, but it's so true. If you're playing a lot, you up on your game, you got that interaction happening, and you're always listening. It's such a good thing, and it takes us out of the being stuck in the computer mode.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And dare I say, you have certainly been around some of the greatest names in the genre, no doubt about it. What a lucky guy, as a young one.
I feel that way.
As a young drummer, to be around some of these just gargantuan names in the genre of jazz. Wow. I mean, that's all I can say. Wow. Again, it's markwalkerdrums.com, correct?
That's correct. And my lesson website is markwalkerlessons.com if you want to check that out.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to send some folks your way. Mark, again, thank you so much for taking the time. I hope you have a successful trip overseas, and you're welcome on this program anytime. Keep us posted on everything that's going on. We'd love to have you back.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to your first Skype lesson.
It's coming right up, brother. It's coming right up. Mark, thanks so much. We'll talk to you very, very soon.
Thanks so much, Jamie. Talk to you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, guys and girls, that's going to wrap up episode 68 of the Drum Shuffle. We certainly appreciate each and every one of you tuning in and week out. We simply cannot do this without any of you guys doing so week after week. Many, many thanks to Mark Walker. Just what a great guy. And as you can tell by that interview, he's got some really great stories and some really cool stuff going on. Make sure you go out there to his website and pick up a copy of that record. It really is worth a listen, no doubt. Next week, I'm going to be joined by the great Jerry Pentecost. You will certainly know Jerry from his work with Amanda Shires and Brent Cobb. These days, Jerry is just everywhere. The Americana Music Awards and Americana Fest. He's kind of the house drummer there, just getting lots of good stuff done. So we're going to be joined by Jerry next week. So we're really excited about that. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you use to listen to the Drum Shuffle. That helps us immensely to continue our growth process here at the show. The thing that helps us more than anything, share a link with a friend. Tell somebody you know that would love the Drum Shuffle to listen to the Drum Shuffle. We really do appreciate it, and that helps us more than anything. As always, we love hearing from all of you throughout the week. The Drum Shuffle Podcast at gmail.com is our email address. We do answer every single email that we receive throughout the week. TheDrumShuffle.com is our web address, and you can find more information about me over at jamieeads.com. While you're there, go ahead and click on those social media links that you see. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. We do try to have social media output throughout the week. Again, thank you so much for listening. Share a link with a friend. It helps us more than you'll ever know. So until next time, may your head stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers.